Hi, I'm Richard Niles of First Films. Producer-director Alex Tweddle and I are working on creating a unique new streaming series, Whatever Happened to Hollywood? The memoirs of screenwriter Jesse Lasky Jr. And welcome to part 2 of our look at Hollywood's forgotten founder, Jesse L. Lasky. In 1913, the Jesse Lasky Feature Play Company was launched with Lasky as president, his best friend Cecil B. DeMille as Director General, and his brother-in-law Samuel Goldfish as General Manager and Treasurer. Sam enthusiastically went to work raising the $35,000 to pay Farnham and Royal and to pay for the production itself. He raised $60,000. To shoot the Western scenes authentically, Jesse chose Flagstaff, Arizona, because he had remembered it from his vaudeville days as being full of cowboys. Lasky stayed in New York with Blanche and Sam. Now, because DeMille had never used a camera before, Lasky sent him west with experienced director Oscar Apfel and cameraman Alfred Gandolfini. They took Dustin Farnham and his dresser, Fred Clay. But when they arrived in Flagstaff, DeMille didn't like the mountainous landscape, the freezing weather, or the gunshots he heard from a local cattle war. They stayed on the train to the next stop, a little-known town called Hollywood, California. Sam was upset with the change of plans, and when they received a telegram from Cecil wanting to rent a barn for $75 per month, money that he had raised, he exploded. Lasky, however, trusted DeMille to make the right decision and calmed Sam down, saying they would be cautious. He sent a wire to Cecil agreeing to the rental of the barn and a vehicle month to month, but warning, make no long commitment. On this economical note, the most lavishly extravagant industry in history was launched. One barn, one truck, one camera. In fact, Lasky never dreamed that their first movie, The Squaw Man, Hollywood's first feature-length film, would lay the foundations of a great industry. For Lasky, unlike other movie pioneers, California was a homecoming. More than that, it was a state of mind, an attitude that influenced almost every aspect of his daily life. The Jesse L. Lasky Feature Play Company, established in a barn on Selma Avenue and Vine Street, prospered and merged with the more powerful Famous Players in New York. They made 25 films in their first year. The company had created an insatiable public demand for movies, and Lasky and DeMille found a way to satisfy it with more production. DeMille was a fast learner and was able to improve his techniques with each film. Meanwhile, the brilliant business acumen of Goldfish brought increased profits. Lasky, as head of production, used his understanding of storytelling to come up with new subjects, new writers, and new stars. He already admired the head of Famous Players, Adolph Zukor, and the two became close friends, having weekly gourmet lunches if they were in the same city. The new company, Famous Players Lasky, was later to become the mighty Paramount. The strong-willed Goldfish clashed repeatedly with Zukor. Though Lasky fought for his brother-in-law Goldfish, Zukor finally insisted that Lasky fire Sam. This put Lasky in an impossible situation. Although he was well aware of Sam's temper, he argued that Sam's business sense was vitally beneficial to the company. The iron-willed Goldfish clashed repeatedly with Zukor. Though Lasky fought for his brother-in-law, Zukor finally insisted that Lasky fire Sam. This put Lasky in an impossible situation. Although he was well aware of Sam's temper, he argued that Sam's business sense was vitally beneficial to the company. But Zukor refused to continue with the incendiary Goldfish, who would never be what he called a team player. Zukor's ultimatum was that the shareholders would have to choose between Goldfish or Zukor. They immediately chose the power of Zukor's much larger company. Despite an enormous golden handshake of $1 million, about $30 million today, Sam was furious and never forgave Jesse, avoiding any future contact. By 1925, Blanche had divorced Sam, and married Lasky's head of scenario, Scottish writer Hector Turnbull. From 1916 through 1932, Lasky produced many successful movies. As vice president of Paramount, he discovered and developed the careers of stars such as Cary Grant, Rudolph Valentino, Mae West, Maurice Chevalier, Spencer Tracy, Bing Crosby, and many more. He produced hundreds of films, including classics like The Covered Wagon, 1923, and Wings in 1927, the first film to win the Academy Award for Best Picture. Many films expressed Lasky's personal love of adventure, music, and his intense pride in his American heritage. But then he was hit by two massive blows. One was bankruptcy brought on by the Depression. The other, far worse tragedy was the death of his sister Blanche, his best friend, his de facto manager, and business advisor at a time when he needed her more than ever. Zucker had pioneered a near monopolistic distribution method which ensured his company's success. For a theater owner to show a Paramount film, the exhibitor had to agree to book all the studio's productions for an entire year. This was known as block booking. By 1921, Paramount dominated film distribution, running the first national movie advertising campaigns and showing its movies in more than 11,000 theaters in the United States. Control of theaters in key cities meant the studio could effectively freeze out all competitors. In 1927, they faced an order from the Federal Trade Commission to cease and desist this practice of block booking and using threats and goon squad tactics. Ironically, the same tactics used by the Edison Company on them 10 years earlier. This was not Lasky's doing. He always deferred to Zucker. As we've said, the business side was almost of no interest at all to him. His life was about telling exciting stories and working with actors, writers, and directors. Lasky was well-liked because he encouraged his directors, such as Ernst Lubitsch and Josef von Sternberg, to be independent. He gave them healthy budgets and rarely interfered with their creativity. Lasky was not a man to buy a dog and bark himself. At the same time, part of the reason the directors wanted to work with him was to have the advantage of his advice and the ideas that could result from a creative collaboration with the enthusiasm and vision of Jesse L. Lasky. His focus was discovering and advising talent and creating stars who trusted his taste. Top writers groomed by Lasky included future writer-directors Billy Wilder and Preston Sturges. Lasky called the years he ruled Paramount with his fiscal-minded partner Zucker, 1916 to 1932, the best years of my life. Though he was a very professional producer, Lasky wasn't very interested in the details, especially when he had Blanche by his side. Lasky's thoughts were painted in broad strokes, addicted to creating marvelous spectacle, telling thrilling stories, and working closely with the most creative talents available. Many of Lasky's films reflected his love of adventure and sense of the romantic. They also revealed his intense pride in his American heritage, none more so than The Covered Wagon, the first great Western epic. After all, his grandfather had traveled across the country in just such a wagon. Then there was The Rough Riders, with the glitter and pomp of Colonel Teddy Roosevelt and his motley band of fighters. Old Ironsides, a flag-waving vision of Tripoli. There were pirates and sea battles aboard the gallant old Constitution, the vanishing American and inspiring portrayal of the passing of the American Indian. Beau Geste was a spectacular rendering of the adventure, romance, and mystery of life in the French Foreign Legion. And Wings, a spine-tingling epic of the light-hearted flying fighters of World War I, which won the first Academy Award. Lasky may have been a workaholic, constantly traveling around the world to find new stars, new writers, new directors, but his family was his true inspiration. Though they had separate lives much of the time, Jesse and Bess remained deeply in love from the moment of their first romantic meeting. He kept his promise to keep her away from the business, and she supported him absolutely. His children, Jesse Jr., Betty, and Bill, his mother Sarah, and his sister Blanche, were everything to him. They supported each other fiercely, and Lasky encouraged his children, Billy and Betty, in everything they tried to do. His relationship with his son Jesse Jr. was exceptionally close. When Jesse contracted polio at 12, a misunderstood disease there, the doctors told his father it was hopeless. Well, Lasky refused to accept it and put his son on a rigorous regimen of exercise, horseback riding, swimming, and tennis. Within 6 months, Jesse Jr. was cured. Now, Lasky himself was a tall, physically powerful man whose love of the outdoors and adventure took him on many dangerous expeditions, on which Jesse Jr. somewhat reluctantly accompanied him. While Lasky was away on his many trips, they exchanged letters often, Lasky recommending films to see and books to read. Later, he discussed his business with Jesse. Even when Lasky was himself struggling financially, he often tried to get his son jobs as an assistant producer or writer. Lasky often signed his letters, "Your pal, Dad." Until his father's death, Jesse took every opportunity to visit with his dad, sometimes just talking about their day, sometimes arguing, but always close. As one of America's wealthiest men, Lasky was able to afford the finest in everything: cars, jewelry, suits tailored in England, champagnes from France, his children in the finest schools, mansion in Beverly Hills, a lavish beach house at Malibu, and a swanky New York apartment. His extravagance often made Jesse Jr. anxious, but his ever-optimistic father thought it would never end. He was sadly very wrong. The stock market crash of 1929 took a while to reach Hollywood, but by 1931, the tinsel was shaking off the town, and executives realized, after years of high living, that the cash cow had been milked dry. They needed someone to take the blame. Fiercely loyal to his company, Lasky had all of his money invested supporting Paramount stock. But it was plummeting. Fewer people were going out to the movies, not because the movies were bad, but because they couldn't afford the ticket price. How can you go to the movies in the evening when you're working 2 or 3 jobs? Lasky could see what was happening, but he told his son there was no immediate reason for alarm. After all, he had a contract with Paramount paying him $9,000 a week that ran until 1934, didn't he? Well, no, not quite. Zucker's exhibitors were Publix, run by Sam Katz, who had purchased numerous giant circuits. This was a mistake because they overextended the company. But, of course, they couldn't admit it, and with stocks plummeting, someone had to be blamed. Lasky was an easy choice. He suggested changing the company name from Famous Players Lasky to Paramount Famous Lasky, and when that was rejected, he suggested Paramount Publix. The new board voted in Katz and Jesse's close friend, Sidney Kent, as co-vice presidents. But Kent, seeing nothing but trouble ahead, resigned and became the president of Fox Films, offering Lasky to come with him as head of production. But Jesse, as the last remaining founder, chose to stay and fight for the company he created. It was a bad decision. He was forced to sell $1.5 million in shares for $37,000. He gave away all of his New York office buildings. We may wonder why his friend DeMille didn't help him, but the great DeMille was struggling himself at the time, being attacked for his high budgets. His only other friend was Harry Warner, who sent Lasky a personal check for $250,000 in return for all his remaining Paramount stock and the deeds to Lasky's Malibu beach house and contents as security for the loan. Jesse Jr. was working as a production assistant in Hollywood, and the whole family were now living at the beach house. He sent Jesse a wire. "Situation serious, but feel can weather the storm. Work hard and be economical. Much love from all, Dad." You'll notice he didn't use any periods because the telegram would have cost more if he had. Lasky and his family were allowed to remain living at the beach house. It was superficially generous, but, as we'll see, in Hollywood, help is often manipulation, and generosity always comes with a catch. An important reason Katz wanted Lasky out was to rid Paramount of its obligation to pay Lasky the $9,000 per week that his contract, running till 1934, demanded. To counter this, Paramount's idea was to launch a PR campaign characterizing Lasky as out of touch and profligate. Time magazine amplified this with an article saying Lasky, Zucker, Kent, and B.P. Schulberg were inoculated with the old-school extravagance of gold-plated cinema production, the fingers of their hands spread unconsciously, letting millions through. A group from Chicago, headed by Katz, had bought a controlling interest in Paramount. They edged out Walter Wanger, Kent, and Schulberg. Then they forced Lasky to take a 4-month unpaid leave of absence. Emmanuel Manny Cohen was an opportunistic young man assigned by Katz to help Lasky sort out his affairs. The energetic and slithery Cohen told Lasky how much he admired him and that he was going to go through all of his accounts to mount a defense at the upcoming board meeting. When the meeting came, the board blamed Lasky for his production extravagance, his bad judgment, and miscalculation. Actually, at fault were Adolph Zucker's overexpansion and use of overvalued Paramount stock for purchases. Lasky knew this, but his sense of honor did not allow him to use this defense against his respected friend. He felt confident that young Manny would defend him. But when Cohen rose to speak, Jesse was shocked to hear him leading the attack. Paramount used Cohen's arguments to justify breaking Lasky's contract. He was offered a humiliating deal as an independent, reporting to Cohen. When he refused, Lasky was unceremoniously fired by the company he had founded. He collected his personal belongings and left his office, heartbroken. Trying to save face, Lasky issued a statement to the press saying, "Because of Paramount's action on a contract with me running until 1934, I have felt it necessary to sever relations." Let us be very clear. The reason Lasky became the fall guy was simply that he was broke. Katz knew he was vulnerable and couldn't afford to fight back with lawsuits, proxy fights, or PR counter-campaigns. Although this is certainly a nice guys always finish last story, clever Cohen got his comeuppance too. Now appointed head of production, he was soon discovered to have been secretly negotiating personal contracts for Paramount stars whose contracts were coming up for renewal. Stars such as Gary Cooper, Mae West, and Bing Crosby. All of them stars Lasky had discovered and signed. When the board got wind of Cohen's duplicity, they held a testimonial dinner for him at Hollywood's Ambassador Hotel. When it was over, Cohen was then put on the Santa Fe Chief to another dinner in New York the next night. Nearing Chicago, the not-so-canny Manny was handed a short telegram from the Paramount executives. It read simply, "You're fired." By 1933, Paramount, without Lasky, Wanger, Kent, and Schulberg, went into receivership with over $2 million in debt. Incredibly, there was no bitterness in the ever-positive Lasky. He was hired as an independent producer by his friend Sidney Kent at Fox, and fought to make the films he believed in, such as Zoo in Budapest with Loretta Young. Hector Turnbull introduced Jesse to writer Preston Sturgis, who Lasky believed had written the best screenplay he had ever seen, The Power and the Glory. Lasky wanted Spencer Tracy for the role, but the studio rejected him because Tracy's alcoholism had disrupted production of the films Marie Galante and A Man's Castle. Lasky told Tracy, "I won't ask you what happened to you on your last film because, well, it might have happened to me. People say you're the finest actor in America, and I am inclined to agree with them. So I'm willing to fight for you because you are the only man to do my film. Understand, I'm going against the studio to offer you the part of your life which will, without question, make you a star. But you've got to give me your word as a man that you won't touch a drop when we do The Power and the Glory." Tracy, touched by Lasky's words, said, "Well, I can't seem to do it for myself, but I'll do it for you, Mr. Lasky." The successful film solidified Tracy's career and was said by critic Pauline Kael to be a precursor of Citizen Kane. Tracy later told reporters he would not have had a career without Jesse L. Lasky. Well, Lasky may have lost his money, but he hadn't lost his touch at choosing subjects and bringing them to the screen. Berkeley Square, a sensitive, provocative work, gave Leslie Howard one of his most outstanding roles. Lasky's warm friendship with actress Mary Pickford dated back to when she was a child star of Famous Players Lasky. Her husband, superstar Douglas Fairbanks, was one of Jesse's best friends, and her son Doug Jr. was a lifelong friend of Jesse Jr. As you can see here, the family spent a lot of time together as neighbors, sharing dinners and picnics. In 1935, they formed Pickford-Lasky Productions, and they made 4 films together. The company was dissolved amicably within a year because of lack of box office success and poor critical reception. But Jesse L. Lasky was soon to make one of the most important films of his career, the Academy Award-winning Sergeant York. It's quite a story, so I'm still Richard Niles, and I hope you'll meet me in part 3 of Hollywood's Forgotten Founder.
Whatever happened to